best in people. And so when you talk about empathy, the way that people really banded together, community came together to support us through the pandemic was incredible. They didn't have to be in the same shoes as the women that we serve who are undergoing cancer treatment, but they understood that that is a journey that nobody wants to be in, especially at a time when you're going through a global pandemic, to be away from home, away from family, and fighting for your life. People stepped up in ways that honestly just blew my mind. I cried so many times. And, I had mentioned that I'd have a bit of a tough week. It was crawling to the finish line here, but I also got to see the very best in people. We had our washer dryers all go down at Sorrentino's Compassion House, all 4 of them at the same time. And I threw a tweet out that went wild, like 300 people retweeted, people were tagging businesses. We had people calling all night and day asking how they could support us. And to me, that is really what it is. It's people coming together to support people, and you don't have to go through that same experience to want to do something to make that individual's life a little bit easier.
Wow. That is Michelle Okere. She is CEO of Sorrentino's Compassion House, top 40, under 40, someone who is an incredible and dynamic speaker. We're really excited to have you here. And welcome to Leadership Line of Sight. My name is Taylor. I am the marketing strategist at Gravidia, and I'm here as always with Scott Connors, the Chief Change Officer at Crankset Group. Welcome to another week and another challenge based on what's going on around us. It's been something else. But with the people that you're dealing with, Michelle, your Compassion House Foundation is something that's taking care of women in recovery or in treatment for cancer that have to travel, right? Like they're away from where they are. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were founded actually 25 years ago by 4 women who saw this need in the community. They understood that when you bring people together who have a common experience, that they will support one another. And they knew that women were coming from all over central and northern Alberta and beyond into Edmonton for treatment at the Cross Cancer Institute. And the idea of being alone during that time, which is so isolating to start with, not everyone understands that journey, but then to be spending time in a hotel or, sleeping on a friend's couch when you're, again, fighting for your life, it just didn't make sense and it didn't sit well with them. So they came up with this concept of Sorrentino's Compassion House. And they've raised the funds through, community donations, capital campaign, an annual fundraiser called Fashion with Compassion that has been in place for 25 years now, and incredibly brought this together. And so it started out with just 5 suites in a house for women with communal spaces. They all had their own individual suites. And you saw what it was like when they all came together, that they would speak about their experiences and their journey. They support one another. They understood what it was like to be away from family and friends, to not feel like people understood what they were going through. And we found very shortly after that we were actually turning away more women than we were taking in. And so there was a significant expansion campaign that happened from 2010 to 2012, when we now have 17,000 square feet and 16 rooms for women who are battling cancer. And we have been full, on and off throughout the pandemic. So as you can imagine, cancer doesn't take a day off, but we've also recognized that there was a bit of a gap between the physical health part of the journey of when people finished treatment here in Edmonton and returned to the rural and remote communities that they called home. They didn't have the mental health and emotional support that they needed. And that part was really important because they'd been through a very traumatic experience. And so over the last several years, we've really expanded our post-treatment programs and support, which, as you can imagine, isolation being 10 times worse over the pandemic, and especially for those in rural and remote communities, that was so key. And so we used technology to reach them. We brought people together through support groups that were meeting on Zoom. We found really creative ways to connect people and just really establish a community of people who were supporting one another and really standing side by side through that.
That's amazing. We're excited to have you here and to talk a little bit more and unpack this a little bit further, because there's so much that got looked past while everybody thought that they were in trouble. It's just heartwarming that you're talking about all these people calling in overnight and like really showing up, but that's also got to be a lot to take. Even when suddenly everybody wants to help, that does create work.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, wasn't what we expected to happen. We actually launched our annual walk run on International Women's Day, which was the same day that all these machines went down in the house. And I thought I don't want to put anything out on our business social media, but I'll just throw it out on my own personal Twitter. And it just took off. And within 2 hours, Global did a story on it. They had me on the evening news. We had people calling. And, thankfully, the Brick stepped up and they have provided us and are actually delivering and installing today 3 brand new washer dryers. And again, it's funny, like washer dryers, that is something that people connected with in that way. But it was something really tangible for people that they could see, like, okay, you have 16 women that are staying with you. You have to wash bedding, and they need, like we're doing 27 to 30 loads of laundry a day. That's important. Let's get them what they need, right? But we have a ton of other needs, obviously, right? Like our operating costs, as everybody is experiencing right now, with utilities going through the roof. Imagine that in a 17,000 square foot building. We had a variety of other needs. And so what was interesting, and it started a lot of incredible conversations with people who were like, okay, that needs met, but what else do you need? How can we support? And so we could really pivot those conversations. And fortunately, we were in a position that, we just started our new fiscal year. We had a list of like all of the things that we needed. And some of the phone calls that we got were just incredible. Like it blows your mind how many people do have that connection to cancer. They've either personally been through it, they've seen somebody that they love go through it. And so they really wanted to help. And it's been really hard, as you can imagine, to kind of cut through the noise over the last couple of years. It's either COVID talk or convoy talk, and now Russia and Ukraine and all of these things happening. And so we're not really the topic of conversation when it comes to like getting on the news. Oftentimes it's overlooked. And so for Global even to just step up and give us 3 minutes of airtime, what a huge difference that makes. Because I think at the core, people are invested in our community, people care. And if you give them an avenue and a way to give back and to get involved, they will, but they have to know what's out there for them to do.
I couldn't agree more. And Scott, I'm not sure if you recognize the last name here, but this guest is married to another recent guest of ours.
Just right there.
Now
yeah. So this is Anyena's wife. Okay. Or maybe Anyena is Michelle's husband. I'm getting to know. Yeah. I got to tell you, I'm Jamie's husband. Like, I know what's up. I stay in my lane. But but when it comes down to that, that's such an interesting perspective on community because, like, you guys have an incredible bond around that.
Absolutely, yeah. Both of us definitely do, and I think where you end up in your career path often is driven by how you grew up. And both of us recognize the importance of community and being involved and engaging people to make our community a better place. Neither of us really came from much. My husband's an immigrant to Canada and kind of came here with nothing. And I grew up kind of on and off reserve, on social assistance, in this weird space where I'm Indigenous. My dad's Korean, my mom's Hungarian. And they were split up. And so I grew up on one side in a mostly white town of 400 people where I didn't really fit. And then I also didn't really fit on reserve because my dad was the lone RCMP officer, which didn't make you super popular, believe it or not. Though my dad didn't do me any favors because when I moved in with him in high school, I remember my first day of high school, he drove me to high school in the cruiser, which is first of all embarrassing. But on the way, someone was stunting and he pulled them over. Well, I'm sitting in the front seat of the cruiser and I'm like, this is not how you make a good first impression in high school. So anyways, it took a long time for me to become like someone people wanted to hang out with.
Oh yeah, you come with the heat, hey? You just come with the heat.
Yeah. But I think growing up in those circumstances for both of us got us involved in our communities early. We both volunteer quite extensively. Members of our Rotary Club. We, involved on boards and things like that. We've held annual fundraisers, and as you know, from talking to him, founded the REIT Institute last year, which is focused on creating opportunities for BIPOC youth, which is something that we're very passionate about as well. And so I think for me, I was so fortunate to have, growing up in a small town and being in a situation where we were dealing with housing instability and food insecurity and things like that. The community knew, And I remember going to school trips, and the night before, my principal calling and saying, do you need a lunch for tomorrow? And taking care of that for me, or wanting to participate in baseball and not having the funds for registration, and someone getting us hooked up with kids sport to take care of those costs. And so I know the impact of some of those community agencies that do make such an impact on kids like me who grew up without anything, and giving us that opportunity to participate, to scholarships and things like that to go to university. Some of the things that I could never have imagined being able to do when I was a kid, I want those same opportunities for the next generation as well. And I want to be there for those who are vulnerable, like the women that we serve at Compassion House Foundation.
At the end of the day, they say that the world is a small place. And I believe in my heart of hearts that is because if you take the whole world, you shrink it down and keep connecting those connections in reverse, you end at community. You end at the place where we live and we work and our kids play. And it is that core community. And each of the three of us, even on this call, have three different communities. But if we all lean into our communities, if we all pay attention to what our community needs are, at least be present to it. And I'm talking to small businesses, and I'm talking to families, and I'm talking to churches, and I'm talking to police stations and fire stations and municipalities. And I am talking about who you are and where you go to work and connecting that community message. If we do that, like you and your husband are doing, the world will win big. And so it is, have to say, refreshing to hear you speak. It's super cool. The washer and dryer, the washing machine story was outstanding, but it was dwarfed by Dad pulling the kid over on the way to school in the cruiser. With you sitting in the front seat with the lights on and every kid that can drive going by you, looking inside that cruiser and, oh, I know her. So I don't know, as a father of two daughters, whether I should applaud your father, but secretly I like his style. I have to say that. I really do.
Yeah, it's fair to say I didn't date in high school.
Yeah, fair. Just as aside for a second, personal note, I was the head football coach of my daughter's high school for her first 3 years. She didn't date much either. And sense of community in America, where I am and where I was growing up, and my parents' parents were immigrants to Ellis Island from Israel, settled in New York City, and the family sort of branched its tree from there. Up and down the East Coast, and now I'm on the far West Coast. You're right that it's where we come from, right? It's what we see when we're growing up. We find a place where we can make a difference. We just have to answer that voice in our heads, don't we? We just have to say, do something. Just do something. And there's so much that needs to be done, and so much of significance and importance. And your ability to rally a nonprofit to help these women recover is, to me, Nobel Peace Prize winning stuff. So thank you on behalf of humanity for all that you're doing.
I really appreciate you and Inyana being villagers in my village. Like, I always think that it takes a village to raise a child. And so the idea is be a villager, right? Like, show up. And that's something that we need organization for, because unstructured help doesn't help, right? Like, when you say all your washers and dryers are down, and let's say that 20 people just came over and said, I'm willing to help. And they just showed up though, saying like, hey, I want to help, but I don't know how to help. How can I help you? That's not help. So can you tell us a little bit about what help is? So there's a whole bunch of people that would really want to help. Just like when you said, this is clearly how you can help. They're like, appliances? We know appliances. We got appliances, right? So then they rallied. Could you maybe give us like 5? Could you say these 5 things make the biggest difference for Compassion House right now?
Sure. Yeah. I think for us, like, one thing is we just launched our annual walk run. So the Walk Her Way 5K. If people want to register a team or register individually, they can go online to compassionhouse.org/walkherway5K. They can sign up and they can raise funds. It's super easy. It takes 60 seconds to sign up. You're going to walk in May. It's May 12th to 14th. You're going to pick a path. You're going to go out on your EDify 5K, engage with us on social media, help us raise awareness, and then also help us raise some funds with peer-to-peer fundraising. Secondly, we have a lot of operational costs around the house, and I've given people a ton, so I don't want to take anything from anyone out there who I've given opportunities to, but one of the things that we need for all of our guest suites is recliner chairs. And so we actually have 16 suites that really need these reclining chairs. A lot of times, women that are staying with us are undergoing treatments that make it really hard to lay flat down, but to be able to recline in a chair is really comfortable for them, so that's something that we're looking at. Donations, obviously that's always huge because we have, just the biggest cost for us is staff salaries, right? We have 24-hour staffing in the house, guest services, program people, and that's not always the sexy thing for people to cover the cost of, but it's really important for us to be able to deliver the services that we do. Hopefully we will be in a position that we can take on volunteers again soon, and our volunteers are always incredible to be able to deliver programs and services in the house. People do things like come in and do the ladies' makeup, which doesn't sound like much, but when you're going under chemotherapy and radiation, you don't feel your best. To just have someone make you feel beautiful that day is incredible. To have somebody that comes in and does yoga with them is amazing, right? Just some light movement, you feel better about yourself. And then we're actually recruiting right now. So we have 2 positions that are available, and I wouldn't feel like I was crawling to the finish line if I had those 2 positions filled and I wasn't backfilling them. So we're looking for a fund development coordinator, and we were also looking for a program manager. So if you know someone great, send them our way. I think that we have an incredible organization with really great people working for us and a strong culture. So if you know anyone looking for a job right now, I know there's a lot of things out there, but hopefully the right person will step up and join our team.
That's fantastic. Thank you for summarizing that for us. Just to make sure that this hits Walk Her Way 5K. So you can go to the website that we're on right here is compassionhouse.org. And going in there, you can walk her way 5K. And this is a virtual run or walk. So even if you feel as though in Edmonton, walking or running somewhere May 12th is a risk, right? You might freeze. It might be raining. There may be all kinds of things. Our weather is real questionable right around that time, but virtually you could still attend. So you guys are going to hit this whether or not it's going to be weather permitting kind of thing. So that's really awesome. So people can get behind you when it comes to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And last year was the first time we had done it. We needed something to help us. As you can imagine, all charities were struggling to raise funds. So just kind of help us with that shortfall. And we came up with this idea. It was a nice way that we could get into the communities that we serve because, we're stationed here in Edmonton, but everyone that stays with us is from outside of Edmonton. And so the people who are most connected with us, our past guests, don't really have a way to engage with us on a regular basis. And so they asked for us to come up with something so that they could actually raise awareness and funds and engage in their own communities. And so they really drove it in their own communities. We had trails here in Edmonton, in Grand Prairie, Fort McMurray, and in Jasper, where we actually had trail signage and everything. And they took care of everything for us. They brought the community out, they did media, and they said just being out there and walking with others from their community, others from their communities or other cancer survivors was just this incredibly emotional moment for them. And because they feel so strongly about the experience that they had while staying at the house, and the impact it had on their cancer journey and their experience, they really do want to give back. It's incredible. We actually have a group. It's called the Compassion Network, which are past guests of the house who act as ambassadors for us in their communities. They do things like this, but they also host those support groups that we were talking about. They're a first point of contact for somebody who's been newly diagnosed, who wants to talk to somebody who's been through it. And they are just so passionate about the work that we do and bringing that home to their own communities.
Oh, well, thank you for being the person behind that cause, because obviously when you explain your story, you understand what it's like to be in need and also what it's like to be an outsider working your way in, right? It sounded like you were an outsider on 2 different communities. And I noticed how this thing that floats around in my mind all the time is that the wounds that we have from yesterday, they actually match the weapons we have for today. So where we were hurt is normally where we're most equipped to help. Is that something that resonates with you?
Absolutely. I think those of us who have done the work, because I think there are, the old saying, hurt people hurt people. So when I think about even leadership, I think a lot of the things that I focus on, I'm very conscious of when it comes to my team, it's because I had a boss or manager somewhere along the line who was really not great in that space, who didn't make me feel valued, who didn't invest in me, who didn't communicate, things like that. And so I think a lot of times it's in response to those experiences, but you have to do that work on yourself first to understand where you came from, to get comfortable being vulnerable and sharing with people, and then to get to a place where you can start to bring those tools, like you said, to the table to be able to address some of those issues. But there's some personal work that has to happen there first, I think, for a lot of us.
And it comes down to love. You can only love someone else to the capacity you're able to love yourself. And you can only know someone else to the capacity that you're able to know yourself. So you would actually only, in most cases, be able to help somebody with to the limit that you could help yourself, right? Just like on the airplane, put your own mask on first.
And it's challenging. And I think for a lot of us who find ourselves in the nonprofit sector, we're here because we care a lot that we want to do for others, but that idea of putting your face mask on first is sometimes hard for us because we give and give and give. And that's something I've struggled with. And I think even at that beginning part of the pandemic, I felt like I had to wear it all myself. I had to put it all on my own shoulders. I didn't want it to impact the team in that way. And so once I got through that and I recognized that I had to empower and develop people, that I had to delegate and elevate, that I had to bring people into the conversation because I didn't have all the answers. And I think that was terrifying. Like we're, as an organization, we don't have a body that oversees us. So we're dealing with a very vulnerable population. However, we're not a long-term care home. We're not actually in the healthcare providing space. And so there was no book of how to deal with this. And so I was 7 months into my tenure as CEO. I had just kind of got my feet under me a bit. We had a strat plan. I just got an approved budget. We just started our new fiscal year. And 14 days in, a global pandemic was launched. So, for me, I felt like I had to have all the answers. And my board members were all dealing with their own stuff in their own businesses. And, agencies were scrambling. And I was so afraid to put that on my team, but I realized the answers were in them. They've worked here for a lot longer than I have. They understand the clients that we serve. They've been through this. We have people on our team who are themselves cancer survivors who have been through a lot of these experiences. And so once I started opening that up and asking, for them to be a part of the solution, I didn't have to wear so much myself. And it definitely, I think, helped engage the team in a different way, but it also took a lot of that stress and anxiety off of me thinking I had to know everything.
That's interesting. And I wanted to unpack that a little bit surrounding what you were saying going through the pandemic. Most of the people that I know that are in the business of helping people are so into the people, and that's part of their fulfillment is all the volunteers that are normally around. And during the pandemic, that was lost. But the helper fatigue, my wife is a trauma nurse, the helper fatigue, that is something that is so real. When you see the world starting to change now, where the gates are kind of opening, I know that we're all cautious around this. What do you miss the most? What are you ready for Compassion House to move towards, or maybe even you as a person in the next few months?
Oh man, you're right. That connecting with people side of it is so important. We miss obviously having volunteers in, but I'm working from home. I still at this point, because we serve such a vulnerable population, and I know for a lot of other people it's getting back to normal, but the reality is that virus is still out there. And though we've been very fortunate not to have, we've had 2 cases, unfortunately never ended up in really bad space as an organization, but when you're undergoing cancer treatment, you are very vulnerable. Your immune system is compromised, and that could lead to hospitalization, that you may have to stop doing treatment for a period of time. So this is this is a life-threatening virus for the women that we serve. And so we are still not back in the office. Some people are, but those of us who can work from home are. And I miss connecting. I miss feeling really engaged in the work and not hearing it secondhand, but actually getting to go into the kitchen and have a conversation with somebody that's staying with us, to get that feedback, to know how we can support them better. And, not just getting it in a Survey Monkey result. And so one of the nice things, I've had to backfill that program manager position. One of the nice things about that has been that I've been able to connect with people in a different way. And so I ran our monthly ambassador meeting last month, for example, and I was so apologetic. I'm like, I know I'm dropping the ball, you guys. Like, I'm not holding things up the way that Nancy did before she retired. We're trying to hire. And I know you deserve better. You deserve to be more engaged with our cause. You deserve to have that touch point. And it's just, you shouldn't be that thing on, like that extra thing on the side of my desk. And they're amazing. They're like, you're doing great. We're so appreciative. It's fine. We're here when but to hear, and we had a new person that was onboarding. And so we did kind of intros and people explained like why they stepped up to volunteer to become an ambassador for us, and to hear their stories of how impactful this stay with us was, how impactful this network of women was. I was like crying and I had to go to dinner after and I'm like bawling, I'm all emotional. But it was so important for me to reconnect with the why, because sometimes it's just like head down, just getting that work done. And you get some wins, but if that's disconnected from the why, it doesn't feel as meaningful. And that's why we come into this type of work, right? We want that meaning in our work. We want to be able to share those stories, and we want to know that we're having an impact on people. And so in a lot of ways, yes, it's an extra thing, but for me to have that opportunity to connect with them in that way was so important. And I'm really looking forward to getting back into the house where our offices are, where we're very connected and integrated into the work that we do.
Scott, you're seeing this in a whole bunch of teams out there where basically we know that maybe teams that aren't, they lose touch with their business plan after a while. Like if somebody isn't bringing the vision to them, and then when they lose their environment, like we knew when it wasn't an option that all of a sudden people would make the connections happen. But now that it's starting to become an option and some places are hybrid, what's your take on this when it comes to like the impact of teams now that being at home may be an option?
The reality of the day, and more than likely the new normal, will be acceptance. Some of us will choose to stay home. Some of us will choose to come in. Some of us will choose to do one or the other. What we need to do is accept our teammates for what they choose to do. And then the hope is that we build enough of a bond virtually with those that choose to be virtual and those that choose to be hybrid, that over time, consistency is the key to any organization running well, is doing the same things consistently well. Over time, you can influence your teammates to come back to work and make it a place that they want to come back to, that they feel safe coming back to. And some may choose to never come back into the office. And we have to learn to accept that too. New day, new normal, new level of acceptance.
That's very concise. I like the way that you put that. Michelle, do you have any thoughts on that?
Because I've had conversations with a lot of folks who are in a lot larger organizations, or more the corporate side of things or government side of things, where it's actually like there's a bit of like a push-pull, like they're getting pushback from their people not wanting to come back in. They've gotten comfortable at home. They don't really want to do that. And I've actually had more of my team being like, we want to get back in the office. When are we coming back? Again, I think it's part of working in an industry that's very focused on the cause and connection. It's easier for them to do their work, right? Like, how are you going to share stories as a fundraiser or understand what the needs are around the house if you don't have that connection? How are you going to run our social media accounts or do our annual report or a newsletter if you're not connected with the women that we serve? It becomes a little bit harder. So we actually have people kind of like itching to get back. And also that team dynamic is such an important thing that you mentioned, right? Like, how do you build a culture? I think about our organization where, we have obviously lots of people who've been around for a long time, but we have 2 new people who have never worked out of the office, who have never met some of their coworkers in person, who don't understand our cause in that way. And board members of mine, same thing, they've never been into the facility and really get it. Maybe they've seen a video, but it's not the same. And then we'll be onboarding 2 new people. And so you end up in this situation where you don't have those relationships. And how do you build psychological safety? How do you ensure that people actually show up? How do they feel included? How do they engage? How do they feel comfortable picking up the phone and asking a question if they don't have that face-to-face interaction? And even from a fundraising standpoint, like, I don't want to do it like this. I want to have coffee with you. I want to go out for dinner. I want to get to know you and what you care about, right? And you lose some of that in this virtual space. And so I really miss being able to just sit and be with people, because you get the little things about them that you might not get in a virtual environment. And so our team's very much looking forward to that. As fun as it has been, to be able to pivot and utilize some of this other technology, we really miss the face-to-face.
Yeah, I also wonder about the alternative. Like when we take a look at the people that are ambitious out there that actually want to get ahead, for me, I would have looked at this as an opportunity. I would have looked at it like, how are companies having relationships and able to progress with the people that are working hybrid, and how does somebody like navigate that in the best way possible? And I think that there's going to be one of those situations where like fortune and love favor the brave. Like the people that are most willing to kind of head into discomfort are going to be the ones recognized. The people that are immersing themselves in the culture have always been the one recognized. And I wonder if the people that are electing to work from home maybe have some cognitive bias where they remember things like, a workplace not being designed for you, the same way your living room is, right? Like work chairs are not the same as a couch. Those types of things, yes. But on the other side, like howling with your coworkers at lunch when somebody talks about like the craziness of like their morning run with their kids or something like that, I think that they might just forget that. They might lose that part where they remember how fun it was to be where you were.
Yeah, absolutely. We've tried to find different ways to bring people together outside of the house through the pandemic. So whether that's just, getting together at a restaurant or at a different space that we can do so, outside, et cetera, just to try and like bring that together and make sure that people do remember those little pieces. And, we had planned actually like a cooking night at Sorrentino's, actually, they're a partner of ours. And so we were going to do that. And then, of course, January hit and things kind of did an upswing with the new variant. But, trying to find different ways to bring people together so that part's not lost. Because I think that you're right. It can become very easy to forget those things and just think like, oh, well, boring, stale office, right? Not that, oh, I can just walk down the hall and have a conversation with this individual. And I really like connecting with them, or we go and have lunch together, we go for a coffee. And so we've tried to keep elements of that together. I make sure at least one of my weekly one-on-ones every month is in person. So we'll grab coffee somewhere. And especially if we have bigger things kind of on the agenda that we need to get into, and even things like, everyone's like performance reviews or performance planning for the upcoming year. That's not something I'm going to do virtually. We'll find a way to get together and do it in person, because you don't want to be delivering that in a way that doesn't feel personal.
I would agree. And also, that's actually something about maybe that we could break down a little bit further. When you think about like it in steps. So I have some of my workforce is working from home. And part of it was to say, hey, let's get together as a team again for meetings. Would you mind just coming in for that? And that seemed to work really well. And now it's going to be a situation where maybe it's a specific project and it's going to be like a 2-hour meeting. Do you really want to Zoom? Or do you want to come on in? We'll put the coffee on, and like and then when people are here, they notice. It's not like we're trying more when they're here. They just notice. It's a place to be where other people that value you are. So then it could be a situation where you talk about like where the balance is. Because I also know that I think that we're going to continue this way. And there's going to be ways that we can learn how to make this a big advantage as other people struggle with it.
Yeah, absolutely. For us, I've always been very flexible. Like when I came on pre-pandemic, I had come from working from home the previous several years. So I worked for a national organization. I saw my coworkers twice a year at national conferences, but otherwise I worked remotely. And I think I was really set up for that. And when I look at a lot of the work that we do, it's really in the community, right? We're meeting with businesses, individuals, community members who want to be involved in our cause. And so to me, if you work better in the office, at home, at a coffee shop, if you want to bring people into the house, if you want to go meet them for lunch, I don't care. I'm not I was definitely not that person. It's different when you have work that obviously has to be done because you're working with our clients, et cetera. But to me, I think that flexibility is super important. And same thing, like when I talk about some of the bosses that I have, I remember my first job out of university, and if I got in like 1 or 2 minutes late, like if, heaven forbid I hit the train that day on the way into work, my boss would point up at the clock as I walked in. And I thought, my goodness, does this really matter that much? Like, we're in a business, you know what I mean? Like, this isn't me checking in at Dairy Queen, like someone's not leaving their shift. And so I've always been the type of person where, it's really about the quality of the work. And if you're getting that done and you work better in a different environment, I honestly don't mind at all. But I do think it's important from a team dynamic that when we're working on big projects, that we have team meetings, that we're working on an upcoming event, that those are the times that I would like to see people in person. And then, like you said, I think from there, a lot of times people want to be around that because and I think now more than ever, that isolation's hard. It's not normal. Like we are social beings. We want to feel like we're a part of the community, that we have a team alongside us. And I think that just gives us the confidence to do the work.
Can you believe the same thing happened today? Like one of my teammates, Tiana, she was coming into the office. I get like a text message. She's like, "Ugh, train." And then she comes in, and the way, like, just to show like the kind of changing of the guard, she comes in and she's irritated that she had to wait for the train and all these people and stuff like that. And meanwhile, her teammates here are actually like, "Oh, you made it. This stuff happens to us." Like, it's exactly the opposite of the way it used to be, where you were already having a bad morning. And then somebody's like, "Oh yeah, I see you're down. Would you like some shoe?" They give you a little nudge. Nobody needs that. Hey, I want to move over to some news. We always like to see how people react, because what we're really hoping is that reactions turn into responses. So we're going to unpack some news items that Scott's collected over the week here and talk a little bit more about them. I'll let Scott take us in here, and we're going to pull the first one up on the screen. Moms in Poland. They left their baby strollers for the moms arriving in the trains from Ukraine. Can you believe it?
I can. Only because I work with people like this all the time. That's incredible. Again, it's just people see a need. They know that people are fleeing, that they need a sense of community when they arrive, that these are things that are tangible for them, that they have sitting at home, and it's something that they can give to another human being, right? Like, that's incredible. And I think we've seen so much of that over the last couple of weeks. And again, I really try and focus on that. Certainly we've seen some of the worst as well. But when people know what they can do to support their fellow man, I think most of the time people do step up.
Oh, I would agree. And obviously this resonated with you, Scott.
Yeah, for all the reasons that Michelle just mentioned. And one more. Symbology. The symbols that we have, the icons that we look at, the symbols that we see when those baby strollers are sitting there and folks are fleeing their homeland, which is just beyond words. It doesn't matter if you're a kid or you're a mom or you're a dad, or grandma or grandpa, or just a single human being. You see those strollers there, symbology says welcome. And to be welcomed in your new place. I think we're in a period of time right now where we need to look to our symbols, to the things that give us faith and the things that give us hope and the things that give us promise. And seeing those baby strollers really, to me, was like, welcome. And I shared that with the board earlier this week, and it resonated. They took it to the ecosystem with the same message. And it also to be present to what you're seeing. And a lot of times right now, because we were so in and we've been in this high stress, right? The stress of the pandemic, now the stress of inflation and the oil and gas war that we're fighting, as we go to the pumps and pay $10, $5, whatever you're paying, you're doing your part for Ukraine. And if that's the way we fight, then let's fight. And so here we go with more pressure on the home, more stress on our paychecks. We're just one more thing at what we finally get to take the masks off, and then we gotta put the purse strings on. It's the symbols. It's being present to seeing welcome and not just seeing baby strollers.
See, a lot of people feel like they jumped out of the kettle and right into the fire, like they're coming out of pandemic right into World War, right? And it's dark. Like the reason that I saw that Poland left out carriages is because they've been there before. They're like, hey, listen, we still got the list from when we packed up last time, and that's horrible to me. And so when you turn that around and you see how like those people are like, yeah, this is what they're going to need. We know because we know. That's rough. And the world really is moving into this place where they're calling it economic war. And the way that each of us is fighting is essentially by contributing towards the things that are more meaningful and starving the things that aren't. Look at all the corporations that have pulled out of Russia, that won't do business with Russia, that won't accept Russian. And it's something that I think is awful because of how it affects people that aren't in the military. But this is where it's basically pulling up. Scott, you also grabbed this. And not only is this a war, but it's volatile. Can you unpack this a little bit?
Yeah, we'll get to the business part in a second. I want to stay with the humanitarian part first with a couple of ideas. And I'd like, and I'm hopeful that there's some folks in the oil and gas industry listening today. The first large oil company and gas company, which in an inelastic market, which we'll see in a second, and I'll explain in layman's terms, I hope well. What we're seeing right now is that they make money. And the oil and gas market's a futures market. What you're paying at the pump is based on the future price. And so people are buying and selling futures in oil and gas. And that's what's driving the price up, is the uncertainty. Doesn't change the profit stream for the oil and gas companies, to be very clear. The first oil and gas company that says we're going to donate X% of our third quarter, fourth quarter profits, and we're going to keep donating those profits to Ukraine. That very first one, well, when we're driving down the street, there'll be a line at that station, and everyone else will have free open pumps. So I think we need to escalate that. We need to take that to the corporations, and now it's time for them to do their part in what you saw on that graph is an inelastic market. That's because the status quo, when all the supply chains, when all of the cargo ships, when all of the pipelines are flowing normally, without disruption, there's a baseline price. When there's any uncertainty in that worldwide supply, it's an aftershock, because the uncertainty is what? And the greater that uncertainty, the higher the volatility. And that's why you're seeing this. And so as we reestablish new shipping lines, new pipelines, new forms of transportation, new delivery countries like us sending to Europe versus Russia sending to Europe. We got to fight this war with all the intellect we have, because we are the military. We're not going to be on the ground, so it's up to us as corporations and corporate leaders. So that's the first one. The second point I'd like to make is this, and I hope the President of the United States, Mr. Biden, might be listening, because I'd like him to really consider this. Please let the people of Russia know we love them. This isn't their war. We know that one man is responsible for this. We know that. We get it. We can see your protests. We hear you. We can see you. You need to fix this. You need to help us fix this. You need to help us stop these atrocities. We need you to do that. We don't want to hurt you. We want you to stop hurting others. So help us with that. I think it's important we don't isolate the people of Russia, because not all of them want this. A vast majority do not.
Yeah, I think that's, I just think that's a really important point, but also at home. Like I was reading actually this morning about the increase in hate crimes towards those of Russian descent, and Russian-owned businesses, cafes, restaurants, tea houses, etc., that are experiencing this, where like there's a man in I think it was San Diego who says he doesn't let his wife pick up the phone at their local restaurant anymore because they've gotten 15 to 20 calls a day of people just spewing hate and violence. And, he himself had fled violence in Eastern Europe, ended up in Russia, and then came to the United States 23 years ago. And he's like, I've been this person. And to have you calling and threatening us because our restaurant has a Russian name, that you see it with, professional hockey players and others, that we have to really be careful about where we are directing our anger. I think you're right. The focus should be on Putin, but not on the Russian people, and certainly not those who have come to our countries for a better life, because they're fleeing that sort of violence as well in their own home countries. So I just think it's really important that, when we talk about empathy and compassion and some of those things at the beginning of the conversation today, that we have those for those people as well, because they're experiencing it. And on the ground, from an economic standpoint, it's those who are most vulnerable. It's everyday citizens who are paying the price for this. And yeah, you're going after oligarchs and you're cutting ties with these things, but it's the average person who is now fleeing, I saw this morning, through Finland, trying to get out of there because of the economic uncertainty and the violence and the things that they're seeing at home. And so I think we just have to be really careful about how we talk about this. In the same way at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a real focus on Asian hate. We can't let this turn into a focus on hate of individuals from Russia.
I agree. And I'm not sure if you saw the hockey game the other night when the Washington Capitals happened to be in Edmonton. Scott, you were recently in Edmonton. You saw an Oilers game. Now, the Washington Capitals passed a rule in their stadium that you cannot display any Ukrainian flags. Can you believe it? They the news on this is that they are directly funded in a way that would prohibit that. And so they came to visit our city, and we showed them the difference. We had the Ukrainian anthem. We had a moment of silence for Ukraine. Welcome to Edmonton. And we don't take that shit here. This made me really proud about my village because they saw something that was just wrong, and they showed people that we care.
And I would say to you that a vast majority of Americans, a very vast majority of Americans, are on your side of the fence on that one for sure. Look at the halls of Congress during the State of the Union address and the amount of Ukrainian support. So I'm, as a poor business decision on the Capitals, it is what it is. That good for good luck to them, because brand is important and brand image is important, and that anyway. But to Michelle's point about hatred in our neighborhoods towards folks from Russia, just wrong. And Putin wins every time you do it. Don't do that. That's what he wants. He wants civil discord at home, here in your homes in Canada and our homes in America. Don't do that. Don't do that. They're people. Put yourself into their shoes for just a minute. How scared they must be right now. How much fear they're living with right now. And I understand, but they're not there. They're not doing that. They have their own journey to where they landed. And let's show compassion. Compassion wins every time.
And the thing that would be the loudest message that you could send to Ukraine is silence. They want to hear the world scream. They want to hear the world repeat what they're feeling right now. And so when it comes down to that, I think that we should value the people that came from there around us, as well as the people that came from Russia. They left, right? One of my greatest mentors taught me, I used to do a hobby, used to train protection dogs. And it's kind of a fringe thing, and you end up with a mentor, almost like a martial arts instructor. And my mentor escaped East Germany in 1959 through the woods in the middle of the night with his family. And him talking about that and what he brought here with him, like immigrants bring this with them. Like, this is something that's like, when we say the wounds of yesterday are your weapons for tomorrow, this is what we mean. Like, we need those people to make us. So the The other thing that you had sent over, Scott, was a little bit more about Elon. So Elon's been in the news a lot lately. He's at one time bought Russian rockets to start the SpaceX program, and is now literally waging war against them via Starlink. This is what appeared on our feeds recently. Elon Musk unexpectedly invites UAW to hold vote at Tesla Pan, and the UAW is the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America.
Yeah, and Michelle will appreciate this. This is transparency, the transparency that she was talking about throughout the organization. Running a nonprofit is about transparency. It's about, this is what we're doing. These are our budgets. This is the money we need. These are the things that we need. It's full disclosure. The more transparent a nonprofit is, the better it is. And when you have Elon Musk saying, you guys want to talk to the folks that work here, please come on in. And whatever you'd like to share with me, I'd love to hear it. Now, let's let that sit for a second, because how many companies are even thinking like that about inclusion, about transparency at the global level? Come into the plant. You're welcome. Enjoy your tour. You think about that for a second when it comes to how you run your businesses and how we run our nonprofits, and the value of transparency and the value of inclusion and the value of humility. If there's things we need to fix, I want to hear about it. That's leadership today, right? Michelle's story about the clock. We've all had the clock leader, right? Right. One of the main reasons I'm a chief change officer is because of those people that would point at those clocks, right? So one of the things that we need to remember, and that is an example of leadership by example, is you want to come in, come in. Our doors are always open. We make wonderful vehicles. We take great care of our people. That's what I think. That's what I say. Prove me wrong. And invite those opinions in the door, right in the front door. Don't hide behind your mistakes. Learn from them.
So with that, I think that some people in the not-for-profit space, they do end up with a little bit of confusion out in the marketplace or out around them about, sometimes how they're structured, or sometimes with people think that maybe a not-for-profit should just be able to gather money independently with nobody working there, or, you know what I mean? Where there's a lot of criticism about transparency when it comes to not-for-profits. What's your take on that? Because Compassion House is not-for-profit, but this isn't your first ball game. Like when you were talking about national level, you were with MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And so you know a lot about how this works.
Yeah, I think transparency is incredibly important within an organization, both at a leadership level with your team, but also with your funders, obviously your board of directors, who you report to, manage risk, all of those types of things, but also with the people that you serve. I think that that's often, it can be a struggle in our industry where there's not always that engagement from those that you serve. And that's something that I'm very intentional about when it comes to my organization. That if we're looking at launching a new program or service, I want to get feedback from those who would benefit from that. I want to know, how would it be best delivered to you? What time, what delivery model, how much time would you commit to that? What's really important to you? What are the themes that we want to bring out from that? What are the topics that you want addressed? That if we don't do with, that's often the focus in nonprofit, right? You get so caught up in doing for that you're not doing with. And I want to work alongside the individuals that we serve to ensure that we're actually addressing real issues, because we often think that we're smarter than everybody else, especially once we get into leadership positions, that I know everything, right? That I know what people need. I know what my staff need. I know what my funders need. And I know what the people that we serve need. And the reality is that we don't. So whether it's, on the ground level with the individuals that we serve, at the staffing level, or with our funders, we try to be really transparent. I would say one of the biggest challenges in the nonprofit sector, though, is that there's not a lot of room for innovation or failure. I think in a lot of the for-profit spaces, failure can be celebrated. We talk about that, right? Like how are you going to create a psychologically safe environment? Well, we should celebrate failure. Well, when you're dealing with a funder and you said these were the things that we were going to accomplish, it's really hard to go back to that funder and say, we didn't. we tried, we learned a lot through it, but we failed. Most people don't want to hear that. Sometimes you get really good ones who want to be along for that journey, and they want to say, awesome, you figured something out. That's perfect. If you can do it better now, I'm going to double down. But that's not everybody. And so that is probably one of the biggest challenges in our sector. And then you have boards that are very risk averse. You want to do things differently, you see the need to. And I think in some ways the pandemic was really advantageous in that it forced us to. It forced us to do things differently. But if we had to convince, I have a board of 13 people, convince them all that it was worth taking on this risk, that it would be their reputations attached to that. And if we failed, they'd have to go explain it. That's hard. That's really hard. And so, whether it's putting more money into, innovation, or it's even little things like people that work in business understand that you got to spend money to make money. If you want to focus on business development, you got to budget for it. If you want to focus on increasing awareness, you got to put marketing budget there. That's a really hard thing for a lot of us in the nonprofit space who want to ultimately run our organizations in an entrepreneurial way. We want to run like businesses. The only difference is that at the end of the day, we're not here to make money for owners of our organization. We're here to support people in the community, and the more money that we bring in, the more we have the capacity to do that. But it's definitely, I think it's starting to shift, but there are still those people that get really caught up on what are your fundraising ratios? And it's like,
I wonder how to field the answer though. I wonder if you said, well, what is an acceptable fundraiser ratio to you? And a lot of them would be very extreme in a case where they wouldn't really get anything done, right? I like to think about the only evidence is how you spend your time and how you spend your money. So imagine that somebody had your calendar and they had your checking account, and that was all they knew about you or your company. What would they be able to tell about where you spend your time and money?
Yeah, it's again, I think it's been shifting. I think there's some really strong advocates in the space that talk or doing TED Talks and things like that about the way we need to shift our focus when it comes to the nonprofit sector. I do oftentimes, because it tends to be people who've gotten wealthy in business, and I ask them, how were you successful? What are the things that you invested in? Did you pay your staff, or did you expect volunteers to do that work, right? When we start getting caught up in those types of things, we talk about retention and the great resignation expected post-pandemic. We want to keep our talent. We want to make sure that people know that they are valued within our organization, that we're investing in them for the future. And part of that is ensuring that we're paying them adequately, that we're giving them professional development opportunities, that we're not burning people out. When it comes to things like marketing and communications, would you, for your business, see if you can get it for free? Who's gonna give you that billboard for free? Or does Facebook want to bump those ads for us at no cost? Yeah, sometimes we have amazing partners, and we're so fortunate in that space, but you can't always be expecting everything to be gifted to you. And again, if you want to grow an organization, if you want to have more impact, part of that is investing in the future.
I totally agree. And taking a look into what you see in the future, I want to know a little bit about that. So, Scott, when we take a look in the next couple of weeks forward, as we turn to close here, what do you think about, or what do you see, or what do you want to have on the radar for leaders at every level?
Yeah. First, I want to, Michelle, I loved what she just said. And if you were listening closely, as I was trying to do, you mentioned the word funders, and you also mentioned the word partners. And in my nonprofit work and in the advisory work that I do in the nonprofit space, I always say there's definitely a difference between the two. And it's the partners we really want to find, and not necessarily the funders, because the funders tend to have a different mindset than the long-term partners. So good for you for having a long-term focus on the financial relationships you're trying to build, understanding that we still got to pay for new washing machines and dryers. That's that delicate balance, right? It's chief cook and bottle washer, and you're backfilling positions, and so it's difficult to work on long-term relationships with short-term needs. So I applaud you for that balancing act. The thing that we need to really recognize about business, we'll turn to the for-profit world for a second here, in the coming weeks is this. We have been I'm talking humanity here. This is a unique time because economically, the economy, the global economy, all suffered the same black swan event, pandemic. And most of those governments overstimulated or stimulated or put stimulus into money supply, the amount of money that's out there, liquidity. And so there was more money in the market to chase things before inflation, right? So up until the time that inflation started, what we've been experiencing as consumers or business to business purveyors, providers, suppliers, and vendors, what we've been experiencing is value. In other words, the mindset is not how much does something cost, but how much value am I going to get from it? And so we were value present, value conscious. That was the decision-making scenario that we were in. And you know, as an economist, you just go, at this point, you're like, well, watch this, because on Tuesday, inflation hit and hasn't stopped since. And so what's happening now is a fundamental ideological and really a mindset shift in our buying decisions, purchasing decisions, from value conscious to cost conscious. Because now things really just started to cost a lot more money, and liquidity has left the market from the spending we did during the value era, I'm calling it, and now we're in the cost conscious era. And so businesses, small businesses especially, be very conscientious of that. If your profit margin is going up, lower your prices and market that. If you're a mid-cap business and you're doing really, really well, and your pipeline of new opportunities is really full, and you've got your resources where you want them and you're ready to attack, and your margins are good, lower your prices and advertise and market that. Appeal to the not value proposition, but price advantage. So we're kind of back into that methodology. I think all businesses need to pay attention to that right now.
I totally agree. And Michelle, what are you thinking about when you're thinking about, like, you know, the next couple of months, you're recruiting, it seems like things are kind of going into motion. Is this going to be maybe unpacking some of those ideas that you had, you know, in the 14 days before your CEO ship changed?
Yeah, absolutely. Though I must admit, I'm one of those people that are just like power through. And so we actually did accomplish everything we had in that strat plan, probably a little bit to my own detriment through that. I think one of the things I learned through that is, you know, it's okay to have to reprioritize and not be able to accomplish everything that you've set out to do. But I've always been one of those people that if I say I'm going to do it, I do it. So we're looking at the next kind of 3 to 5 years, working with my board on a strategic plan. And there's a ton of opportunity, I think, right now, especially here in Alberta. You know, we're set to be in a really good position going forward as a province and really lead the way from an economic standpoint in the country here. And so we definitely want to grow with the province. And so there's a big capital campaign going on right now called the Own Cancer campaign to expand into Calgary, or expand the largest cancer clinic in North America into Calgary. And so we're really exploring what would that look like for us? Could we have a space in Calgary to potentially provide accommodations for the women that would be coming in there, or even beyond that, right? We know there are people with a variety of different needs, and we're really looking at that. So having some really big conversations about what our mission looks like moving forward, how we can continue to have an impact on people's lives and potentially touch even more people moving forward. So that's definitely a huge focus for us going forward. We're really excited about it, and hopefully this is the last time we go through this kind of unmasking and looking, you know, to a brighter future as far as the pandemic goes. So we know there's a ton of opportunity out there, and we want to be able to continue to impact women and families throughout our province.
That's fantastic. When I take a look at you know, the weeks coming forward, I could and what that plan would look like, I'm so glad that you guys are considering things like moving into Calgary, basically anticipating the needs of the people that you care most about and saying, how are they going to need us here? I think that that's fantastic. And really, when it comes to the next few weeks and months in Alberta, wow, things are changing here real quick. When you take a look at, like, I was reading my little girls. There's a Dr. Seuss book called The Lorax, and when things start to get bad, these little bears called barbaloots get crummies in their tummies, and then they head off, right? In my mind, that's like our friends from the Newfoundland that normally come to work here when things are good, and when things are bad, they get crummies in their tummy and they head back off to the island. And I saw in traffic my first rock. They call it the Rock, and they put it on their back window, and it's a picture of their island. And I saw my first rock, and I was like, the Barbaloots are back! And it was so exciting to me because it just means that things are changing. I have a real estate team that is going to set records this year. Our real estate market is going to set records this year. But really, when we see the big rush that's about to take place in Alberta, and my goodness, if you don't know this is coming, brace yourself. When you see what's about to take place here, I think the biggest thing that I can tell people as a marketer is those that will be the most valuable are going to be the most visible. So right now, the white noise is going to be so high. The competition with the news and with everything else is going to be so high that your marketing team may have been passive before. And if it's not active, if it's not able to take you to the business that you want to get, your dollars just aren't going to stretch far enough. So get ready, everybody. I'm calling it right now. Start your engines. The Newfies are back. So thank you so much for joining us today. This has been Leadership Line of Sight. My name is Taylor. I am the marketing strategist at Gravidia, but we have a very special guest today, and her name is Michelle Okere. Michelle, you are lovely. The work that you do is so meaningful. And what you shared with us today and your perspective, it's honestly unique. Where you come from, who you are, and how you choose to help within our community, it's definitely remarkable. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on.
And as always, we appreciate your perspective, Scott, the Chief Change Officer of Crankset Group, the person that is whispering in the ears of CEOs that are making big changes to lead their teams to certainty and confidence as we head through this uncertain period. It's up and down, roller coaster time. So thanks, everybody, and have a remarkable day.